Good afternoon, and welcome to the API webinar, Are You CK-4 or FA-4? Find out which new API diesel oil specification is right for you. I'm Becky Burrows, Director of Recognition and Specialty Events with Randall Riley, and it is our pleasure to have you all in on what is sure to be an informative session. We will hear from Kevin Ferrick with API this afternoon discussing the two new diesel engines oil standards the American Petroleum Institute, API, approved earlier this year, API service categories CK-4 and FA-4. The new engine oil standards have been developed to protect engines, meet new government regulations, and ensure engine oil performance. Kevin Ferrick, Senior Manager for Engine Oil Licensing with API, will share more about the new CK-4 and FA-4 service categories and which will suit you best. Before we begin, I would like to cover a few things that will help you get the most out of this webinar. To get a full view of the presentation, click the arrows on the Grab tab on the top left of your control panel to minimize the panel. This will place the tab on the top right of your screen and will enable you to see the entire presentation. We would also like to encourage questions. To ask a question, bring your control panel back by clicking the double arrows and type your question in the box that says, Enter a question for the staff. We will answer these at the end of the webinar. Thank you for attending today, and make sure you ask your questions as they arise. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker. Kevin Ferrick currently manages API's Engine Oil Licensing and Certification System, a voluntary licensing program designed to define, certify, and monitor engine oil performance. The program's marks, the service symbol donut and certification mark starburst, help consumers identify quality engine oils for their gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles. Mr. Ferrick also manages API's Diesel Exhaust Fluid Certification and Motor Oil Matters programs. Mr. Ferrick became the Engine Oil Program Manager in March of 1998. His duties include the management of the API Lubricants Group and its work groups and task forces. Kevin, we welcome you today. I will now turn the presentation over to you.
Becky, thank you very much. I appreciate that kind introduction, and I want to thank Randall Riley for their great help and support in putting together this presentation and our opportunity to provide more information on CK-4 and FA-4. Again, my name is Kevin Ferrick. I'm the Senior Manager for API's Engine Oil Licensing and Certification System. For those who may have been interested, this is the second presentation that we've done on CK-4 and FA-4. If you wish to see the first one that we did last month, you can see that through the CCJ webinars.com website under their archived presentations. This presentation is intended to build on what we had presented last month. For those that are not familiar with API, let me go through and talk a little bit first about what API is, and then we'll get into the sort of the nitty-gritty about CK-4 and FA-4. The American Petroleum Institute, for those who are not aware, is a national trade association that represents all aspects of America's oil and natural gas industry. Our 650 corporate members, from the largest major oil company to the smallest of independents, come from all segments of the industry. They are producers, refiners, suppliers, marketers, pipeline operators, and marine transporters, as well as the service and supply companies that support all segments of the industry. So now that I've dispensed with the official language, the official words about API, let me explain a little bit more about what we do. The American Petroleum Institute achieves our mission through the four items that are shown here: advocacy, research and statistics, standards, and certification. The two that we're going to talk a little bit about today are the standards and then the certification that's behind the standards. So as far as standards are concerned, API, since we represent a significant part or essentially all of the oil and natural gas industry, we actually manage and maintain standards, more than 500 industry standards that cover the gamut of the industry, from exploration and production to refining, marketing, and pipeline. Naturally, as part of the standard setting process that we do, we set engine oil standards, and these are the ones that that are my responsibility and my group's responsibility, and certainly the ones that we hold near and dear to our hearts. For those who may not be familiar, API has actually been setting engine oil performance standards for almost 70 years. In fact, the first were issued in 1947, so we'll actually hit 70 next year. There's three standards that we actively maintain. The API 1509 Engine Oil Licensing and Certification System. That essentially is the API Bible on engine oil performance standards. If anyone had questions about what our standards are and about the service categories that we license against, that's the document that people would turn to. We also maintain two other standards related to bulk oil. One is the bulk oil testing, handling, and storage guidelines, and then a companion bulk engine oil chain of custody and quality documentation. So as those names make clear, those relate to the handling of bulk engine oils. Now, we've been setting the standards for almost 70 years. We've actually been licensing oils against our standards for more than 30 years. We started licensing just what we call the API donut, and then we evolved into a program with some additional marks after that. But we've actually been licensing for more than 30 years. And then we've been auditing products or testing engine oils in the marketplace for the last 23 years. So when we talk about standards and certification, at the most visible sign of an API certification would be the marks. And in the case of diesel engine oils and other fluids related to diesel, and the marks that my group and our program is responsible for, the ones that you see on the screen now. The API starburst in the upper left corner is one that's intended for gasoline engines. As it says, the two that we're going to spend a lot more time talking about, right in the middmiddle of the API CK-4 and FA-4 donuts, we're going to talk about those. And then since we're talking to an audience that may have, or that does deal with diesel engines, API does also certify fluids against the ISO standard as meeting the diesel exhaust fluid certification requirements. So API manages, sets the standards for and manages the certification or the standards for diesel and gasoline engine oils, and we certify fluids, the diesel exhaust fluid that meets the current industry ISO standard. And these are things that it makes sense that API is also managing the diesel exhaust fluid certification, largely because they sort of go hand in hand with the operation of the diesel truck. Let's go into a little more detail about what the engine oil licensing and diesel exhaust fluid certification programs are. The API engine oil licensing and certification system, I realize it's got a fairly long and lengthy acronym. It's the best we can do. But to remind people, it is a voluntary program that licenses oils that meet API's globally recognized engine oil standards. The standards are developed in cooperation with oil marketers, additive suppliers, trade associations, ASTM, ACC, the American Chemistry Council, and SAE, and vehicle and engine manufacturers represented by the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers, the Japan Automobile Manufacturers Association, and the Truck and Engine Manufacturers Association. And as part of our program, our API monitors, we sample engine oils in the marketplace through our aftermarket audit program, test them to make sure that they comply with our requirements, and then, if need be, work with the marketers to correct any issues or problems we find in the field. And our diesel exhaust fluid certification program is modeled very much like the engine oil program. It is also a voluntary program, but it certifies the diesel exhaust fluid that meets the ISO 22241 standard. The fluids are monitored in the marketplace just as we do engine oils. We sample them in the field, test them, and then if we find an issue, we work with the marketer to get it fixed. Just a few words about current program statistics. Today we have 728 licensed oil marketers in 59 countries, and that represents more than 15,000 licensed products. For diesel exhaust fluid, we have 83 licensed diesel exhaust fluid marketers in 6 countries, and that represents 142 licensed products. Okay, so why don't we talk about the need for CK-4 and FA-4. For many, you've probably been hearing about the work that's been going on to develop a new diesel engine oil standard, and for the years it was in development, it had the label of PC11, so proposed category 11, which, when you realize that API has been setting standards for a long time, you can imagine there's been PCs 9, PC10, now we're PC11. That particular standard was approved by API in February 2016. It actually had been approved by an ASTM panel charged with diesel engine oil standard setting. In December, API endorsed that standard in February 2016. And once API adopted it, it got the name CK-4 and FA-4. So you may often hear about people referring to it as PC11. We need for people to start getting used to the idea that it's CK-4 and FA-4. When it was approved, at the same time we approved it, we also said first licensing would take place on December 1st, 2016. And what that means is that API licenses would be allowed to display the CK-4 and FA-4 brands beginning on December 1. That also would be the time that marketers that are properly licensed would be able to start using those two categories in their API donuts, in their API certification marks. Marketers are free to claim that they meet the new performance standards. They can do it now. They just can't put it into the API service symbol donut until December 1st. Many ask, well, why do we need it? And in fact, it's not uncommon that most people think that all oils are the same. They probably are, I don't know if people give a lot of thought to that engine oil standards have to change, and largely they have to change there's a variety of reasons why. Mostly it has to do with the changing of the technology and the need to provide better protection for that technology. So in this case, FA-4 and CK-4 is really no different. The new categories were developed to improve upon the existing standards by providing enhanced protection against oil oxidation, protecting against engine wear, particulate filter blocking piston deposits, and protecting against degradation of low and high temperature properties. And these new categories, as I mentioned earlier, they really resulted from several years of hard and collaborative work between engine manufacturers, oil marketers, and additive suppliers. The API system is able to bring those groups together. They work collaboratively to reach a consensus-based industry standard that they are all willing to accept and manufacture products against. So let's talk a little bit more about FA-4 and CK-4. So for many that are operating diesel engines, and here in the North American market particularly, we have gasoline engine oil standards that are designated with S. S for service, current standard is SN, and then the diesel categories C for commercial have been the only other standards. So you had gasoline and diesel engine oil standards. That worked well up until now. When we went down the road to develop the new PC11 category, the diesel engine manufacturers requested that we actually have a standard that was, in essence, split. So you ended up with a PC11A and B, and now that it's approved, CK-4 and FA-4, and we're going to talk about how they are different. And one of the main reasons why they ended up with requesting two categories instead of one, to be blunt, not all engines are the same. The 2016 engines versus the 2017 engines. The newer engines can be smaller, they're more efficient, they're somewhat duty cycle dependent, and they are engine dependent. So there was a realization that as the new engines are being introduced, that there were some differences between the newer engines and, say, the engines that are on the road today, and that these engines would likely need maybe some different kinds of lubrication. So we have the split category. The new engine oil standards, both engine oil standards were developed to meet new government regulations. There are new regulations related to reducing greenhouse gas emissions that are going into effect. But at the same time, they had to develop the new categories that would ensure that the engine oil would perform adequately in these newer engines. So if you were going to look at why we needed a split category, the real issue came down to having an engine oil performance standard in place that would protect the engines that, say, are largely running on CK-4 today, the current API category, and a new oil that would offer some additional opportunities, additional options, additional performance measures that would satisfy the newer engines that are being introduced. So a little bit more about these newer engines. Well, let's talk a little bit about engine oils and how they help. Engine oil, people need to understand, is not something that's there simply to be changed out periodically. It is an integral part of the way the engine operates. I know it sound silly. If you don't have engine oil in the engine, that engine's not going to go for very long. But the truth is, it's providing more than just preventing, or it's providing more than just lubrication. It's actually performing a variety of functions. And while it's doing that, it's working to operate within the tighter clearances of today's engines. It's working so that it works properly with the new materials being used in those engines. It is trying to help the smoother surface finishes that are inside those engines. Again, these are all changes being done to meet new emissions requirements, to ideally to help engines run more efficiently. And they're also there to ensure that the coatings on the parts are properly protected. So the engine oils are doing a lot. They're also doing things like providing hydraulic function in some of these engines. So when we talk about an engine oil and we talk about how these engines operate, you have to keep in mind that engine oil is not strictly there to cool or to lubricate. It's also there to provide certain protection, and it's there to help that engine operate in its most efficient manner. All right, so let's talk specifically about the CK-4. The simple way to put CK-4 is that it's the upgrade, the replacement for CJ-4. It is the backward compatible oil, so that means it can be used in most applications, and I say most, where CJ-4 is recommended. You will hear me say probably more than once during this presentation that you should always check with your engine manufacturer to make sure that they're recommending that you upgrade to CK-4. CK-4 will be available in what we call XW30 and XW40 viscosity grades. There's no such thing as an XW30 grade. It's just sort of a placeholder for the various grades that you could have. But for example, this means a CK-4 would be available in a 10W30, a 10W40, and a 15W40 vis grade. You could even have them lighter than that, say at a 5W30. But what I suspect most will see in the marketplace is you're going to see the 10W30s and 15W40s are what is likely to be recommended. But again, if you're asking your engine manufacturer whether you should be upgrading to CK-4, you also want to make sure you talk to them about which vis grade you're supposed to be using. Now, the CK-4 features a minimum high temperature, high shear viscosity. So in essence, it's the same one that would be in effect for CJ-4. And CK-4 is intended for on and off highway applications. Again, it's the replacement, the upgrade to CJ-4. If you were going to look at what CK-4 provides when you compare it to CJ-4, the simple way to put it is in that left column, CK-4 provides improved protection against that list of items: oil oxidation, viscosity loss, aeration, particulate filter plugging, catalyst poisoning, engine wear, piston deposits, related viscosity increase, and degradation of low and high temp properties. And in essence, when you compare that to CJ-4, there are a lot of similarities. CJ-4 is a fine oil, protects lots of engines, but in essence, CK-4 is an upgrade. So You've got oil oxidation protection in CK-4. The goal with CJ4 is just to prevent oxidative thickening. Viscosity loss, similar. Particular filter blocking in CJ4, particular filter plugging in CK4. Engine wear has always been something that they guard against. Piston deposits, again, something that's been very common with the engine oil categories that API has put forward. But then you see soot-related viscosity increase under CK4 versus just more standard soot handling properties. So when we look at CK4, even in the verbiage, it's clear that it's definitely an upgrade over CJ4. So let's talk a little bit about FA-4. So FA-4 is the new standard. So CK-4 is the upgrade to CJ4. For many that are using, driving trucks on the road today, they're likely to be recommended to go to CK-4. FA-4 we have to talk about a little more differently, a little more carefully. It is a new standard. We're often asked, well, why FA-4? What does that mean? Because if F stands for service for gasoline engines and C stands for commercial, what does F stand for? And I can tell you what it stands for is it sounds different from C and S. It is intended to make sure we deliberately picked something that would be different enough so that there'd be no confusion, particularly if someone was ordering an engine oil over the phone. FA-4 is the new standard. It actually applies to lower viscosity grades, 0W30, 5W30, and 10W30, and they're intended to meet the needs of the next generation diesel engines being built. You will not have a 1540 FA-4. The standard does not permit it. The 10W and these 30 weights, the other thing you need to keep in mind is that, and we'll go a little bit into detail about that, but a 10W30 FA-4 is not the same as a 10W30 CK-4. The 30 in the viscosity grade for FA-4 is different. It is held to a lower limit than the CK-4. So the thing to remember is FA-4s are different, which is a good thing to keep in mind, to be sure that if your engine manufacturer says to use a CK-4, you want to make sure that's what you use, and vice versa. If you're directed to use an FA-4, that's the one you should be using. Again, the engine manufacturer knows the differences between the oils and is recommending those oils based on those differences. Now, why do we do it FA-4? Well, largely it's a tool for decreasing greenhouse gas emissions. So the lower viscosity of the FA-4 oils are expected to provide improved fuel economy. But at the same time, this tool, this FA-4, is also intended to protect the engine just like the CK-4 oils. As I say, they're at the same time providing engine protection. With FA-4, there's limited or no backward compatibility. This one you really need to check with your engine manufacturer. In fact, the user language for FA-4 specifically says limited or no backward compatibility, precisely because you want to be sure that the engines where it's being used that the engines using them, FA-4 has been recommended for those engines. And again, it's intentionally named FA-4 to prevent confusion with CK-4 oils. So looking at FA-4 versus CJ-4, you may often hear, if you look at the list of what FA-4 meets, it basically meets the CK-4 limits. In fact, the limits are the same. Oil oxidation is preventing oil oxidation, viscosity loss, aeration, particulate filter plugging, catalyst poisoning, engine wear, piston deposits, soot-related viscosity increase, and degradation of low and high temp properties. But the thing to keep in mind at the bottom of that chart is, remember that FA-4 is blended to a high temp, high shear viscosity range of 2.9 to 3.2 centipoise. So at 10W30, FA-4 oil has to fall, the 30 in the 10W30 designation has to fall between 2.9 and 3.2. That compares to 3.5 minimum that a 10W30 CK-4 oil has to meet. So there is a distinct difference between an FA-4 10W30 and an FA-4 and a CK-4 10W30. And one of the main reasons for this is that it provides engine manufacturers with an option if they're looking for various ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They're doing things to optimize their engine's performance, to help their engines run more efficiently. FA-4 may be one of the tools that they choose to use to make sure that engine runs as optimally and as efficiently as possible. So the one takeaway from any discussion that we have today and any messaging that we have for check with your engine manufacturer. If they recommend using it, then you should be using it. But the opposite is also true. If they say use CK-4, you should be using CK-4. So what do we do? People probably often ask, well, what exactly is an engine oil performance standard? To be honest, it's the major part of a new standard is that you design an oil specification, and the major way to do it is define a set of rigorous tests that each formulation must pass. It's not strictly a chemistry recipe. It's not a chemical recipe, or it's not simply just put a little bit of this and that and you get the engine oil. The oils have to undergo a series of tests to verify that they actually meet the performance standard. CK-4 and FA-4 specs actually use many of the current tests that CJ-4 uses, but some of them have more stringent limits. And then for CK-4 and FA-4, 2 new tests have been introduced to ensure that the next generation oils can cope with the oxidation stability and aeration control needs of modern engine technology. And we'll talk a little bit about those tests. So the two new tests were combined with what I would call the carryover test from CJ-4, and those are intended to ensure that the new oils will protect both the newer and the older engines. FA-4, in case you're wondering, FA-4 oils are subject to the same performance tests and the same limits as CK-4. The only difference is that FA-4 has a different high temperature, high shear limit, but all the other tests are the same. The pass-fail requirements are the same. We often get asked, because when we talk about FA-4, we talk about greenhouse gas reduction through better engine performance and ideally better fuel economy. We do tell people there's no specific test for fuel economy in the diesel category. There is one in place for gasoline engine oils. We do not have the same for diesel. In this case, the decision has been made that having the different high temp, high shear limit will distinguish the FA-4 oils from the CK-4 and should provide fuel economy benefits to those engines that are designed to use FA-4. So the tests. If an oil marketer wants to validate their oil and become licensed against the API standard, they have to undergo a series of tests. There's actually three tests, 3 Volvo tests. The newest one is the T13, the T11 and T12 carried over from CJ-4. And you can see, and then there's 3 Caterpillar tests, the Cat C13 and 1N. Those are from CJ-4. The other new test is the Cat oil aeration test. This replaced an older aeration test that had been in effect for a number of years. And then there's 2 Cummins tests and something called the roller follower wear test. So if an oil wants to be qualified for licensing against the API standard, their oil has to pass these engine tests. These are fired engine tests. They are some run up to 500 hours, so it's no small feat to qualify an oil and survive the regime of tests that oils have to undergo to be considered qualified to become API licensed. Then there are a series of bench tests that all oils have to undergo: high temp, high shear, high temp corrosion, kinematic viscosity, the NOAC test, which is a volatility test, foaming, sooted oil, MRV, which is mini rotary viscometer, so measuring an oil's ability, quite frankly, measuring an oil's ability to move at colder temperatures. There are seal compatibility tests, and then there's a series of viscosity tests to verify that if an oil is a 15W40, that it really is. So when you talk about these new categories, you need to understand that they undergo a significant amount of testing to validate and to verify that the oils are suitable for use in the engines on the road today. So let's talk a little bit about manufacturers. So we asked the question, which oil brands will you be able to purchase? Well, I can't tell you that just yet. On December 1st, licensed brands will appear in the API directory of licensees. So that is an online directory. And we would say those are the brands to purchase. Today, I can tell you at this moment, 34 brands have been approved. They're not appearing on the licenses yet, remember, December 1st. But 34 have been approved against CK-4, and 4 brands have been approved against FA-4. Since December 1st is quickly approaching, we suspect there will be a significant number of products put in for licensing in the very near future. And then, so going on, which engine manufacturers will call for CK-4 or FA-4? Well, I hate to spoil this if you were hoping to hear this, but you're going to have to wait for the engine manufacturers to publish their recommendations. Again, we use this as an opportunity to say you always follow your engine manufacturer's recommendations, and then you use API licensed oils. Licensed bottle oils display the API donut, those donuts that we showed you in the beginning. FA-4, as a reminder, has a very unique design, different from the regular donut. But look for the so when you're looking at bottles of oil, if you're buying it by the bottle, please take a moment, turn the bottle over, turn it around, look on the back, look for that API donut. If the product is installed from a bulk tank, I do think you want to take a few moments to verify that the service provider is the one that is going to install the oil you expect. We always recommend that you get it in writing. So we've been asking the question, are you CK-4 or FA-4? And one of the things that we realized we had to do when we introduced the new API categories was that we had to spend a lot more time doing education and awareness. If this had been just a traditional upgrade from CJ4 to CK4, we would have done some work to get the word out, but truthfully, it would have been a fairly smooth upgrade, and the marketplace would have gotten used to the idea that there's this new standard in effect. With FA-4 becoming part of this, we realized that we had to do a lot more to get the word out. And quite frankly, as we've learned, we should have been doing this all along, because we think it's important that people understand that there are performance levels for engine oils, and getting the right oil for a truck and for your car, for that matter, is an important thing to do. So diesel oil API has launched something called the Diesel Oil Matters program. And it's being done through a variety of venues. It's on social media. It's one of the important ways for us to get outreach. It has really helped us reach a broader community of the diesel vehicle users. At the moment, we're at 23,000 followers and growing. If you're not following us at Facebook or Diesel or on Twitter, I would recommend you do it. You can also go to dieseloilmatters.com and see more information about the new categories there. Now, no education program would be complete without someone having to do some kind of video, since it seems like we have no qualms anymore about putting videos on YouTube. So somehow I got roped into doing a couple of these. So I beg your patience, and you can hear a few words from me talking about both CK-4 and then FA-4.
CK-4 is the upgrade to API CJ4. So for most of you that are driving trucks today, you're likely to be recommended to use CK-4. There's a lot of good reasons why you should upgrade, but mostly CK-4 is an improvement over the current standard, and it's ideal for use in current engines on the road today. For more information about API CK-4, go to dieseloilmatters.com.
Okay, so if that particular one wasn't bad enough, we'll talk about, there's one more. So again, I beg your indulgence.
FA-4 is different. It's only supposed to be used where it's recommended. So for older trucks, they may not be able to use FA-4. But for the engines where it's recommended, it is going to provide the performance that those engines require. The other thing people need to keep in mind about FA-4 is it's going to have a different mark for you to determine whether a bottle of diesel oil is CK-4 or FA-4. For more information about FA-4, go to dieseloilmatters.com.
All right, so again, we're going to have to repeat the mantra. When we talk about the new diesel categories that are coming, it's important for you to remember that if you're operating diesel engine trucks, if you're a fleet operator, maintenance professional, owner-operator, truck owner, you do want to check with your engine manufacturer to make sure that you get the right oil. They're going to make those resources available if they haven't already. The best way to probably reach out to them is through their own websites to verify which oil you should use. But some good rules of thumb, if you're supposed to be using CJ4, it's not unlikely that you will be told to go to CK4. If you're operating a newer engine, they may suggest and recommend FA-4. The key thing to keep in mind is these oils are coming. They may be slow to hit the market. I suspect you'll see some available on December 1st, but over the next year or so, you are going to see them become more and more common, particularly when the engine manufacturers start recommending them for both the trucks that they have on the road today and for new trucks that are coming onto the roads. For more information, you should go to dieseloilmatters.com, as our video said. And that said, I guess I open up the floor to questions. If there are any, we'd be happy to. I'm going to do my best to do this through with the help of our friends at Randall Riley.
All right, well, thank you, Kevin, for that valuable information. The first question that we've received today is, can I top off a CJ4 oil with CK4 oil?
Okay, well, you're going to hear me hedge that question a bit. Officially, we would tell you that it's best to, if you need to add oil, it is best to add the viscosity grade and the performance level that's already in the engine. So in other words, if you have a CJ4 oil in your truck and you need to top off, we would say if you have a 15W40 CJ4, we would recommend a 15W40 CJ4 oil. That said, engine oil standards require that oils be miscible so that they can mix. And if a truck driver needed a gallon of oil for their truck because they were low and the CK4 oil was available, I would absolutely tell them to put that oil in, because running low on oil is far more detrimental than any possible issue that could occur, I would think, with the CK4 oil. So that's kind of a hedged question. If you really needed to top off, I would say go ahead and top off if the CK4 oil was available.
Okay. The next question that we got says earlier in your presentation you briefly covered the need to use the appropriate oil for your engine, but what happens if CK4 oil is used with an engine requiring FA-4 oil?
Well, the engine manufacturer would probably be the better one to answer that. It is a different oil, and if an engine is designed for FA-4, it's going to run optimally with the FA-4 oil. CK-4 can provide will provide the same level of protection as the FA-4, but the FA-4 has the different vis grade. So in general terms, we would recommend that if the FA-4 oil is what's recommended, that's the one you want to be sure to use. If something gets put in accidentally, you should verify with your engine manufacturer that the CK-4 oil is okay. My gut feeling is, again, the oils are very similar they certainly provide the same level of protection. The only concern would be what kind of impact would say the CK-4 viscosity have when compared to the FA-4. So there may be a performance issue. My gut feeling is you probably wouldn't you may not notice, but then again you might. Certainly it could affect a fuel economy. So that's just something that people need to keep in mind, that if you are using, if you're supposed to use FA-4, you really want to strive to use that.
Okay. The next question we have is, what will the new donut look like when the new CK-4 will also be API SN approved, 10W30, 5W30?
Well, the CK-4 donut will be the same whether it's just CK-4 in the donut or it's got an accompanying S category or a passenger car oil category. The different donut is the FA-4 donut. That is going to be different. As we showed earlier, there's an upper left quadrant that is different from the traditional donut. So if you're getting CK-4 and you see some other claims in there, it's not uncommon that a diesel oil marketer will, licensed marketer will put in, they'll have CK-4, but they'll probably also have CJ4 and CI4. Don't be surprised if you see an S category with that. The oil has to meet the requirements for, generally has to meet the requirements for the gasoline engine oil requirements too. Otherwise they can't make the claim. But that donut will be the same as it would look today with the CJ4 oils. Okay.
Next question, what is the expectation on when CJ4 oils will be completely replaced by CK-4 or FA-4?
Well, FA-4 won't replace CJ-4, I suppose. I guess theoretically it could, and once the engine manufacturers are satisfied with it, I suppose. But the thing people need to keep in mind is that diesel categories don't go away that quickly. So CJ4 oils are likely to be around for a while. You can still, believe it, you can still find CI4 and CH4 oils, particularly globally. So one of the reasons we keep older categories is to satisfy the needs of engines outside of North America, where maybe a lower quality performance level is still in use. But CJ4, I suspect, will be around for a while. The key thing to remember is to make sure to look at the API donut on the back of the bottle, because that will tell you what the highest performance level is. So if it's truly a CJ4 oil, that will be on the donut, and there won't be CK4 in there, because then you know you're getting a true CJ4 oil.
Okay. And do CK4 and FA4 oils have specs related to SAPS and phosphorus levels?
Yeah, they do, but they're the same as CJ4. So these are CK4 is a low ash oil, so sulfated ash, phosphorus, and sulfur. The limits for CK4 are the same as they were for CJ4. So 0.12 phosphorus maximum, off the top of my head, 0.1 sulfur, I believe, if I remember correctly, and then 0.4 sulfur. So that has not changed. So the same levels that applied for CJ4 carried forward for CK4.
Okay. Do you know how many manufacturers will require FA4 oil in their new trucks?
At this point, no, I don't. It's something that is up to the individual engine manufacturers. We did ask. That they were not able to tell us yet. So the best thing I can recommend is to check with your engine manufacturer, go online. As we are actually going to make some improvements to the diesel oil matter site. We would hope that perhaps we can put something in that will make it easier for people to link to engine manufacturer information. That's something we're continuing to work on. But at this moment, you're really going to have to rely on the engine manufacturers to come forward with their recommendations.
Okay. The next question we have is, can a lower viscosity CK4 oil, such as 10W30, be used in place of a 15W40 CJ4 oil, and how will this affect my engine?
Well, okay, again, that's gonna depend on the engine manufacturer. I'm throwing a lot onto them, but you know they make those engines, so they should be able to answer the question depending on the engine type. It is very possible that when they recommend the new CK-4 that they could recommend a lower viscosity. That's something that the owner-operator, fleet operator should be paying attention to, particularly if their belief is that the 10W30 CK-4 will provide the same level of protection as the 1540, and it would be suitable for use in that engine, then they should do it. There are benefits to some studies have indicated, in fact, it's fairly commonly held that a lower visc grade oil does help provide improved fuel economy. It sort of makes sense. The less thick the oil, the more easily that the engine parts move. If the engine is not working to move a heavier visc grade, then in theory you're going to get better performance and better fuel economy. The issue, of course, that the engine manufacturers have to wrestle with is whether they're comfortable with the a lower visc grade going into their on-road engines today. That's something that they're going to have to decide. But I think you're going to find that many engine manufacturers are will be recommending lighter visc grades, even for engines perhaps that are on the road today. So again, I have to fall back to my pat answer. This one you have to check with the engine manufacturers. Once you know what they're recommending, then the next thing is to make sure that you understand that the oil that you're about to buy and take off the shelf is the one that you're being recommended to buy. So if the engine manufacturer says a 15W CK-4, best thing I can recommend, if you're the one buying it, turn that bottle over and take a look to make sure that the donut is saying 1540 CK-4. That's especially true if you're looking for an FA-4 oil. And then if you're getting service at a bulk from a service location that's dispensing the oil from bulk, which I know on the heavy-duty side that is wildly common. In fact, it's probably the majority of the oil changes are done that way. If you're not accustomed to talking to your mechanic, to the service provider that's going to do that oil change, this might be the time to do that, to stop for a moment and confirm what the oil is that's about to be put in your truck.
Okay. So I've got another question here that's a little lengthy, so just bear with me while I kind of read it. CK-4 will be backwards compatible. You can where CJ4 is recommended. This came in while you were going through your previous answer. Can you market a CK4 oil as a CJ4? Basically saying if you meet CK4 specs, then you meet CJ4 specs.
Well, okay, today there are CJ4, there are formulations today that are being sold as CJ4 that could be actually CK4 requirements. So yes, you could have packaging, you could have products on the market that are really CK performance level, but they're being claimed as CJ4, and that's happening now. Largely because there's a waiting period from the time an API standard is approved to the time you're allowed to actually license that category. There is a waiting period, and in that waiting period, the oil marketers have the opportunity to license their CJ4, in this case CJ4 oils, that really do qualify as CK4. Now remember, the CJ4 tests essentially carried forward to CK4. When you take those tests and add the new tests that were introduced for CK4, not only are you having assurance that the oils qualify as CJ4, but that they can qualify for even a higher performance standard. So I don't think any people should worry about getting a CJ4, whether they're CJ4 oil they're getting really is CK-4. The system is essentially set up to allow for that to happen. So the short answer to my rather long answer is you could be getting, even today, some CJ4 oils really are CK4, and you should be benefiting from that performance.
Okay, thanks. The next question that I've got here, which looks like it might be our last one, is will CK-4 oils be required for off-highway engines?
Well, again, required is that's going to be up to the engine manufacturers, but CK-4 is intended to replace CJ-4, and so in those applications, off-road, so agriculture, construction, those types of applications, if CJ-4 is being recommended for those now, it wouldn't shock me that CK-4 will replace it. At some point, CK-4 will be the more readily available product, so it may be that it just as a matter of market conditions that the CK-4 oil will be the one that's easier to get, and so by default they'll start recommending it for non-road applications. The one thing we know at the moment is that FA-4, in contrast, is intended only for on-road. No one has come forward and said for non-road, so construction, agriculture. So the fallback is going to be that the non-road, so agriculture, construction, will start. They'll start recommending CK-4 for those applications.
Okay. Well, it looks like those were all the questions that we have time to answer today. So thank you again, Kevin, for your valuable insight and the information that you shared this morning. We certainly want to thank you, our listeners, for attending today's webinar, and we hope that you have gained innovative information on running your business more effectively. We also, of course, thoroughly appreciate API for making this webinar possible. If you have questions for the speaker that we were unable to address during the program, please send them to me. You can do so by replying to the email you received from GoToWebinar with today's login information, and I will forward it to the API team so that a member can follow up with you. If you would like to view the webinar again or send it to someone else in your company, you can do so by going to www.ccjwebinars.com. The website will also be updated with additional information on future webinars as they arise. Thank you again, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.